9 kings built history's greatest monuments, but all ended up crying. Today I'm revealing the shocking reasons why these powerful rulers wept over their own architectural masterpieces. The truth will leave you speechless. 1. Shah Jahan's Heartbreak. The Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan stood before the completed Taj Mahal in 1653, tears streaming down his face. This wasn't tears of joy, but of profound grief and regret. After 22 years of construction, employing over 20,000 craftsmen, and spending nearly the entire treasury of the Mughal Empire, he realized that no amount of marble, precious stones, or architectural perfection could bring back his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. The monument he created as the ultimate expression of love had become a painful reminder of his loss. Historical accounts from court chroniclers describe how the emperor would visit the tomb regularly, often breaking down emotionally. The very beauty of the structure intensified his sorrow, as it represented both his greatest achievement and his deepest pain. This white marble mausoleum, now considered one of the world's most beautiful buildings, was born from a king's tears and continues to move millions of visitors who witness its ethereal beauty and understand the heartbreaking love story behind its creation. 2. Khufu's Pyramid Obsession. Pharaoh Khufu dedicated his entire 23-year reign to building the Great Pyramid of Giza, becoming so obsessed that he bankrupted ancient Egypt. This massive tomb required over 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2 to 80 tons, and took an estimated 20 years to complete. Archaeological evidence suggests that 20,000 to 30,000 workers participated in this monumental project, with many losing their lives during construction. The precision is mind-boggling. The base is leveled to within 2.1 centimeters, and the pyramid was originally 146.5 meters tall. Ancient texts suggest that Khufu became increasingly obsessed with the project's perfection, spending his final years personally inspecting every chamber and passage. When he finally entered the completed burial chamber, where he would spend eternity, chroniclers noted that the pharaoh was overwhelmed by the accomplishment. He understood that he had created something that would outlast civilization itself, but the emotional weight of his mortality in the face of such permanence brought him to tears. 3. Ramesses II's Immortality Complex. Ramesses II, known as Ramesses the Great, ruled Egypt for 66 years and was obsessed with achieving immortality through architecture. He carved the massive Abu Simbel temples directly into solid rock cliffs, featuring 4 colossal statues of himself, each standing 65 feet tall. The construction took over 20 years and required thousands of workers who faced scorching desert heat and dangerous conditions. What made this project extraordinary was Ramesses' attention to detail. He designed the temple so that twice a year, on his birthday and coronation day, sunlight would penetrate the inner sanctuary and illuminate his statue perfectly. The king reportedly visited the site multiple times during construction, and historical accounts suggest he was moved to emotion seeing his vision carved into eternal stone. When the temple was completed, Ramesses stood before his giant stone faces and wept, knowing that while his mortal body would decay, these monuments would outlast his flesh by millennia. The realization of his own mortality, despite creating something eternal, overwhelmed the great pharaoh. 4. Louis XIV Golden Prison. The Sun King, Louis XIV, transformed a simple hunting lodge into the most opulent palace in European history, but Versailles became his beautiful prison. The project consumed nearly half of France's annual revenue at its peak and took over 50 years to complete. The palace features 2,300 rooms, 67 staircases, and the famous Hall of Mirrors with 357 mirrors reflecting light from 17 windows. Over 36,000 workers labored on the project, with many losing their lives due to dangerous conditions and diseases. Louis XIV personally oversaw every detail, from the angle of each fountain to the placement of every statue in the gardens. Court observers noted that when the king first walked through the completed Hall of Mirrors, reflecting infinite images of his glory, he was visibly emotional. However, his tears weren't just of pride. They were of realization that he had created a golden cage. The palace represented not just his power, but his isolation from the real world. He had built the most beautiful prison in history, where he would spend his remaining years surrounded by luxury, but trapped by his own creation. 5. Justinian's divine ambition. Byzantine Emperor Justinian I embarked on building the Hagia Sophia in 532 AD, determined to create a structure that would surpass Solomon's temple and prove his divine authority. The construction took only 5 years, but required 10,000 workers and consumed the entire treasury of the Byzantine Empire. Justinian imported the most expensive materials from across the known world: marble from Asia Minor, columns from the Temple of Artemis, and gold from every corner of his empire. The dome, 180 feet high and 100 feet in diameter, was an engineering marvel that defied the architectural knowledge of its time. When the cathedral was finally completed in 537 AD, Justinian entered the magnificent structure and fell to his knees in tears. Historical accounts describe him crying out, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." But his tears were not just of triumph. They were of overwhelming spiritual emotion. The emperor realized he had created something so beautiful and divine that it transcended earthly power. The Hagia Sophia represented his connection to God, and the emotional weight of standing in this sacred space brought the mighty emperor to tears. 6. Nebuchadnezzar's Love Monument. King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon built the legendary Hanging Gardens around 600 BC as a desperate attempt to cure his wife's homesickness. Queen Amytis, from the mountainous region of Media, was deeply depressed living in the flat, dusty plains of Babylon. The king commissioned the construction of artificial mountains with terraced gardens rising 400 feet into the sky, creating one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The project required revolutionary engineering, a complex system of pumps, aqueducts, and chain mechanisms to lift water from the Euphrates River to the highest terraces. Thousands of exotic plants and trees were transported from distant lands to recreate the green mountains of Media. When Nebuchadnezzar first walked through the completed gardens with his beloved queen, witnesses reported that the mighty king wept openly. His tears were of both joy and sorrow. Joy at seeing his wife's happiness, but sorrow at the enormous cost in lives and treasury. The gardens represented his unconditional love, but also his guilt over the sacrifices made to build this paradise. Despite creating architectural perfection, he understood that love cannot be built with stone and gold. 7. King Ludwig II's fantasy escape. King Ludwig II of Bavaria poured his entire royal fortune into building Neuschwanstein Castle starting in 1869, creating the most fairy tale-like castle ever constructed. Ludwig, known as the Mad King, was deeply troubled by political pressures and sought refuge in architectural fantasy. The castle took 17 years to build and cost 6.2 million gold marks, an astronomical sum that bankrupted the Bavarian treasury. Ludwig designed every room as an escape from reality, with murals depicting Wagner's operas, a throne room inspired by Byzantine churches, and an artificial grotto inside the mountain. The king personally oversaw every detail, from the swan motifs throughout the castle to the hidden doorways and secret passages. Tragically, Ludwig lived in the castle for only 172 days before his mysterious death in 1886. On his final visit to the completed castle, witnesses reported that Ludwig stood alone in his throne room and wept bitterly. His tears were of profound loneliness. He had created the most beautiful castle in the world, but it had become a monument to his isolation. The man who built a fairy tale castle had no one to share it with. 8. Emperor Qin Shi Huang's Death Army. Emperor Qin Shi Huang of China became obsessed with immortality and spent 11 years building the massive Terracotta army to protect him in the afterlife. Starting in 246 BC, over 700,000 workers labored to create 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, each with unique facial features and expressions. The emperor was terrified of death and believed that this clay army would serve him in the afterlife, just as his real army served him in life. The underground mausoleum complex covers 98 square kilometers and includes horses, chariots, and bronze weapons. Archaeological evidence suggests that many workers were buried alive to keep the tomb's location secret. When the emperor first descended into the completed underground palace surrounded by his terracotta guardians, historical records describe him as overwhelmed with emotion. Court chroniclers noted that Qin Shi Huang wept as he walked among the silent clay soldiers. His tears were of existential fear. Despite creating the most elaborate burial complex in history, he realized that no amount of preparation could prevent his death. The man who unified China and built the Great Wall was ultimately defeated by his own mortality, and his terracotta army became a monument to human vulnerability. 9. Emperor Akbar's abandoned dream city. Mughal Emperor Akbar built the magnificent Fatehpur Sikri in 1571 as his new capital city, but abandoned it after just 14 years, making it one of history's greatest architectural tragedies. Akbar constructed this red sandstone city to honor Sufi Saint Salim Chishti, who predicted the birth of his heir. The city featured stunning palaces, mosques, and courtyards built in a unique blend of Islamic, Hindu, and Persian architecture. Over 100,000 people lived in this planned city, which included the massive Buland Darwaza, Victory Gate, standing 184 feet tall. However, the city faced a critical water shortage problem that made it uninhabitable. When Akbar was forced to permanently abandon his dream capital in 1585, he returned one final time to walk through the empty palaces and silent courtyards. Contemporary accounts describe the emperor breaking down emotionally as he wandered through the deserted city. His tears were of bitter regret and failure. He had created an architectural masterpiece, but his poor planning had turned it into a ghost city. Fatehpur Sikri stands today as a perfectly preserved monument to royal ambition and human error.